unlocking your world of creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, where every bean tells a story of adventure. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY.
Welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity. We talk to creative practitioners everywhere about how we get inspired and how we organize ideas, and of course, how we gain the confidence and the connections to turn our ideas into impact. And today we're going to do something special. We often have individual interviews with creatives. We're going to do a roundtable conversation today on one of the 6 themes in my book, Unlock Your World of Creativity. And our theme today is developing your brand around a signature method. And I've gathered some creative leaders from different parts of the country and a different world of industries to explore how their unique methods have become memorable brands. So welcome in Ala Tir, Jessica and Damon Zuawi, and Jody Koch. Jody, Jessica, and Ala, and Damien, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we've got New York City, Florida, Denver. I'm in Boise, so we've got the whole country represented. Well,
Yeah.
we're asking today what makes someone a memorable individual personal brand, but also what helps us stand apart in a crowded field of our industries. And clearly, the idea is not just talent. If there's a lot of talented people, there's a lot of ideas out there, but there becomes a recognizable way of thinking, of serving, your customers, of creating and solving problems. And that's why today's guests were representing filmmaking, hospitality / wellness, interior design, all this rich mix of creative expression. So let's just do a quick introduction. Ala, what would you say you're creating these days, and what is your method of doing that?
Well, I've been a filmmaker all my life. I'm a writer-director, and I run the Independent Film School. We're celebrating our 20th year this year. And if I had to sum up in a sentence what's our signature thing, it's the fact that we refuse this idea that some people have talent and some people don't. Some people are born with it, some people aren't. And what we do instead is create the conditions that make it possible for anyone to unleash their creative genius. Picasso said that all children are artists, and the problem is how to stay one. My school is a solution to that problem, because I think it's possible to recover the artist that you were born to be.
So good. I look forward to exploring that more. And Jessica, just the name of the brand has
Yes.
a lot of Oakwell Beer Spa. Could we have 3 words that say more? It's really
Yeah,
good.
exactly. And just because beer spa is a new concept for most people, I'll explain very briefly. So we are the owners of Oakwell Beer Spa, and it is a social day spa that combines private spa suites with a craft beer and wine tap room. We have 2 locations in the greater Denver, Colorado area, and we are now in the process of franchising the concept nationwide.
Damien, certainly what you're creating is unique, but what's the signature method or platform behind it?
Yeah, sure. I think on your end, since we do something extremely niche, the end goal for us is desirability and longevity of our brands. And with that in mind, we've always believed that we had to create an experiential wellness brand that really deliver something different but not gimmicky. And with that, we take familiar hospitality touch points, arrival, check-in, we own a day spa. So arrival, check-in, the smell, the privacy, the atmosphere, the pacing of our service, and we choreograph them into a memorable ritual that feels emotionally distinctive. And our belief is that brands become unforgettable when they don't just sell service. And we really want our guests, not our customers, our guests, to feel that. They don't remember usually the size of the tub or the size of the room. They always remember how they felt after working out in the spa.
So good. I can't wait to hear more. Jody, what are you working on these days?
Oh my gosh. I actually just got back from Denver and so much creativity and so much beauty there. It is amazing. I have been in business 22 years. I named the company after my twin daughters, Hannah, Elizabeth, and Sydney Aaron. So it's my own company. Everybody gets confused because they're like, why Jody Peterman? And I'm like, Jay Peterman is what I was going to go with. But I was living in New Jersey at the time and everybody started laughing at me when I would say the name because Seinfeld was based out of New York and Jay Peterman was the goofball boss. And who wants to be known as a goofball designer? Not myself. So away went that. And I stole my daughter's middle name and came up with the design process. But I think what makes me unique is I went through a building of my home when I was in Grimes, Iowa, and it was absolutely horrific. It was just a horrific process with the builder, and I just became the worst version of myself during that process where I was not a good mother, not a good friend, not a good wife, not a good anything, and I was just angry all the time because of it. And my nervous system was shot. I felt like nobody had my back. The builder was taking advantage of us, and I was just over it, frankly. And so I decided to take those lemons and make some really sweet lemonade out of it. And that's how I developed the 5D process, which is taking our clients through very efficiently and systematically on the design end from the very beginning. So instead of working off of those allowances that builders like to have, clients work off of, we're going to get all the designing up front, create all the documents up front. That way you can have clear communication with your contractor on what's going on. They can bid out exactly what you want. And before you've even purchased an appliance, you can go back and make changes to those before you end up buying it and have to do all sorts of, getting everything turned back in and doing, all those things, like redoing everything. It's just a pain. And now I'm burning it all down and going through my own new rebranding as well. So as in business, you always have to pivot.
Yes, we can all appreciate this 5D approach. You have us all nodding, and I'm sure the listeners are going, I've lived that. I wouldn't want to do it again. So I can't wait to dig into it more. A lot, in your book, How to Fail as an Artist, you talk pretty openly about what we creatives often go through: rejection, resilience. You just keep going anyway. Sometimes developing the signature method isn't pretty. It's not glamorous. It's simply persistence. How do you feel that your creative philosophy emerged from that kind of experience?
My approach to training artists and to my own creative work is not something I constructed. It's something that emerged organically. And it was a matter of not creating it, but identifying it. Oh, that's how I teach. And so figuring out what makes me effective, both as a mentor and as an artist.
I like the distinction there, that I didn't create it, I identified it. And sometimes it's like going through that experience, you go, there it is. This
it's
is what
it's my approach to creativity in general. I'm working on a script right now. I don't feel like I'm coming up with ideas or constructing a script. I feel like it's a matter of letting the things show up and finding it. So building a film school involved the same process that I used to create a movie. It was showing up. It started as screenwriting classes that kind of happened by accident, frankly. And then as I began to produce and direct my own films, I started to offer producing and directing workshops. And as my work evolved, how I teach the work evolved. Yeah, so it's all how I create work and how I teach it's all in one and the same process.
Yes. And Jessica, you and Damien, the same thing. From curiosity and travel, you saw a lot of things, you experienced a lot of things. Perhaps you said, this is it. Did you see the idea of a beer spa out there and said we could create this? Or did you say, oh, look at all these parts and pieces. I wonder if we could put all these together. I wondered how it emerged for you.
It was a mix of both. So Damien and I come from the corporate world prior to starting a beer spa, but we're both very entrepreneurial. We knew we wanted to open a business together. So the month after getting married, we decided if we're going to take some risk, now is the time to do it. So we decided to quit our corporate jobs at the same time. We sold everything we owned. We packed 2 backpacks and we headed off on what was to be an indefinite round the world trip, looking for interesting business concepts that we could bring back and scale in the United States. And the deal was that we weren't going to come home until we found the perfect business idea. So we ended up traveling for a little over a year. We went to 25 countries. we saw a lot of interesting things. There were some criteria that we were looking for, right? We wanted something that could be scalable, something that could be adapted to the US market. There's a lot of quirky things out there in the world, like Mario Kart racing in the streets of Tokyo, which didn't meet the scalability or adaptability aspect, but it was really interesting. And we ended up discovering the idea of a beer spa in Eastern Europe. We were in Zakopane, Poland, found ourselves soaking in a tub filled with hops and malt with a free-flowing keg next to us. We definitely had that light bulb moment then of, hey, this is something that we could really see taking off in the US. We love craft beer here. We felt like there was a big gap in the wellness market, that all spas are catered towards women in the US. It's typically catered towards the healthy and wealthy, not the everyday people. But we continued traveling and exploring different spa cultures around the world to take bits and pieces of the things that we like the most. So we went to onsens in Japan, jjimjilbangs in South Korea, wine spas in France and Spain, and really took all the best that the world had to offer. So it was a bit of creativity, definitely, but there was a systematic approach behind it.
I love that. And Jody, of course, in interior design, not only your own experience, but the more customers and clients you must have heard from, these ideas, these memorable moments of success or failure must have contributed to how you built your 5D process.
It did. But I also, as we evolve and change, I think I'm just here on this earth to evolve and change constantly. I can't sit still. I am a generator of ideas. I really should have gone into marketing. I love that the day spa is all about the senses and everything else. So as I went through my journey of awakening for the past 10 years and healing myself and all the transitions that I'm in, I find that our homes are so very important, not just the places that we live in and the things that we host. It's the textures, it's the five senses, just like you guys do at your spa. And I'm sure that you do with your, you're capturing everybody at that moment. It's not just when you walk in the door, it's how does it feel here? What are you smelling? What are you touching? What are you hearing when you walk in? How is your nervous system being reset as you're going through these processes? So again, everything's changing and evolving as we speak. But I think that getting your home created in a way that protects your style and your budget, because authenticity is huge. So we have to look at that. You can't discount authenticity. I'm so tired of the copy paste designers, white cabinets, gray cabinets, paint your walls this. I don't give a crud about trend. I care about what your style is and how you want to bring that out. And I think that's what makes me different. I hate it when people interview me. I'll say, if you're going to interview me and ask me what the hot color is of the year, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what the hot color of the year is, because if you don't like it, I'm not going to put it in your house. I just think that just bringing that authenticity out and touching all those senses, making sure you're engaging everything and resetting your nervous system when you walk in and creating that safe space, whatever that looks like to you, is now my passion.
Yes. And Jody, I want to follow up on that because you said something, and a lot, I'm sure this is going to come up for you, but this sort of intuitive, it's artistic. I'll know it when I see it, I feel it, but you've got to have a repeatable process. There's something about constructing something, doing it, over and over and making it signature. How do you move beyond just, oh, it's so creative, to a real process?
Yeah, I think the more mastery you have of the craft, the easier it is to be creative. So, in my various courses, my suite of screenwriting courses, there are 3 story tools that I teach. And if you know those 3 story tools, you have a lot of room to get very creative and still end up with a really tight, well-crafted script where the pages move. In directing, I have 4 steps to working with actors. And at first it's mechanical, and as you absorb it and it becomes intuitive, that's how you arrive at authentic and believable performances that look like real life. I teach producing courses, and I have these 2 things that have to be in place. And when they're in place, the movie gets made. And when they're not, doesn't matter how good the script is and how much even money you have, the film doesn't get made. So yes, I love systems and I love craft. And the more you know it, the more creative you're free to become. Back to Picasso, what I always say to my students, he was able to, his representational drawing skills were impeccable. The guy could draw, and it's because of that he could invent Cubism. So I think you have to learn to draw to invent Cubism.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say I love containers. Efficiency is my thing. If it's not in a container, I'm going to create a container to put it in. But like why we have the 5D process. So you're being creative within each container. So the first D is conversation that we have with our clients to make sure that we're presenting a proposal that works for their time, budget, and efforts that they want to make sure happens. And then 2D are the 2D plans that we do. So there's lots of creativity that happens within those 2D plans, but it's in the container. And then we move on to the selections part of it. And then we move on to the creating documents. And then we move on to 3D is taking everything we picked out and putting it into rendering so you can see what it looks like in 3D. And then 4D is that compassion that we have along the way with our clients when they're going through a remodel. Because there's our new construction, because there's a lot of stress. It can become a full-time job if you're trying to do it yourself. And I don't know how people do it while they're having a family and running to the soccer games and doing their full-time jobs, as it just gets crazy. And then 5D is transcendence. So how do we take what we learned along each and every job that we do to become better than we already were? So how do we go back through everything and take it and become better?
So good. And Damien, in our introductions, you were beginning to outline some systems.
Yeah.
You systematize the creativity. There's surprise and delight, but then there's also systems.
Yeah.
How do you begin to think about that?
Point systems or even pillars, I think, for us, so as entrepreneurs, if we start from the early days, we want to reinvent the wheel, but we really wanted to reimagine the category, asking yourself how to build a better spa. Well, a new generation of spa, and we asked whether the spa category itself was limiting, like transactional, stuck day spa in the 90s. That was pretty much what we have written, the keyword we have written on our napkins around a few beers and a glass of wine. And the second is designing for longevity, desirability, often designed for emotion, as you said, Jody, not function, because as we all say, we all know people don't remember figures. They often remember feelings, emotions, the reconnection we have with your significant other, your best friend, during in a hotel, at a restaurant, or at a spa like ours. Build rituals and not transactions. Again, like the day spa here in the US are stuck in the 90s, transactional. They run after you for membership. And the Generation Z, the millennials, are fed up with that. Or parents, the boomers, are okay with that. That's the way they grew up. Get a deal now before it's over. But they don't get the millennials and the Generation Z and the Alpha don't care about that. They can get everything in an instant cheaper anywhere else. So let's not preach them on the price. Let's preach them, if we have to preach them as a brand, gently on the emotional part of their experience. Finally, protecting the brand and the experience through consistency, which is one of the hospitality. We're in the business people. We run a company with 50 people, 25 in each store. You have to manage those humans being. And with that, you need to have a structure in place, 5-star standards that Jess has developed on how do we check you in? How do we greet you? Smiling at all time, like Starbucks used to teach their baristas back then. The music. Why is the music at 8 a.m. should be on? And what's top music? Why not the top shorts music? Why is the top needs to be clean and hair free or dust free? Why or the towel should be folded in a certain way? That's your 5-star standards, and that's a part of how we protect the brand and the experience through consistency everywhere, every day, with any new staff members we're hiring.
Yes. Yes. And it does come back to that. It's replicable. You expect it, so therefore you have to repeat it. And
Yes.
you've talked about artists and training the artists. Let's now switch our conversation a little bit between building our own brands and showing them, our students, our mentees, how to develop their signature methods. How have you woven that into your curriculum and your teaching?
I mean, I'm not in the business of teaching people how to build a business. Although as an artist, you are a business, clearly, but my expertise is in turning every aspiring or working artist into the best writer, director, producer they can be. What I will say on that is, in terms of developing your brand, is that I always say to artists, to what Jody said, it's not about what's in style, what's the market is looking for. The market doesn't know what it's looking for. It's about finding your most authentic work that you care about that makes you feel. If you create work that makes you feel, it's going to make the audience feel. And so I always say to artists, forget being original. Everybody tries to be original. There's nothing original about trying to be original. Forget that. Be you. Finding the work that only you could create is going to be your best work. So your brand that is the brand building. It's who you are, what you bring to it that only you could bring, that comes directly from the heart. Whether you're writing a memoir or you're writing about pigs in space, you're writing about yourself. How do pigs in space feel about each other, what they want, what they fear, what their relationships are like? You're sharing yourself. That's really your job as an artist, is to share who you are.
So good. And Jody, yes, we've been talking about your personal brand, but you have staff, you have designers, you have, even the contractors and team that you're working with. You want them to bring their fingerprint to the work and yet stay within a process. How do you find that balance?
Funny enough, like I told you before we started this, I'm going through a whole rebranding, a whole new everything. So before the years that shall not be named, AKA COVID, I had 14 employees. And then after that, I went to 7. And recently I just went to myself, and I have 1099 contractors that I work with now. I find it very freeing and less stressful for sure. But I just make sure I gather the right team. So a lot of my former employees are now 1099s. They have full-time jobs, but they assist in other ways. And so having that loyalty and saying what you're going to do, what you're going to say, and say what you're going to do, and creating that I've got your back, you've got mine. It's just building your team. So I think that's really the most important thing, to make sure that you're creating continuity through everything and making sure that your clients are getting the best of you, always. And then, of course, when things don't go right, as in remodels and construction, that is typical instead of atypical, you just apologize and you just do the best you can to get it fixed.
And Jessica, you're talking about growing the brand now, franchising it. How exciting. But that puts even more demand on the signature approach. We expect franchises to be, I think of all the food, but also hotels. When you see one Hampton, you want to know that it's just like the other ones. But it's such a unique experience that you've built. How do you envision evolving and growing and yet staying true to what made Oakwell special to begin with?
It's really one of the scariest parts when you think about franchising, right? Is that we're no longer the ones there controlling the guest experience. How do we ensure that consistency that Damien mentioned, while still remaining authentic? You don't want it, or at least we don't want it, to feel like a McDonald's or, same exact thing from the interior to the beverages that they serve. It's not authentic enough for our brand. So we want to give our franchisees some play with being able to, from an interior design perspective, have some nods to their local environment, and from the beverage selection, being able to use local breweries, but while staying true to what is Oakwell. And what makes us different is that hospitality. Our level of hospitality, we like to call it Michelin casual. So it is very refined. It makes you feel like royalty every time you step in. However, it's not pretentious. It's not stuffy. And so how we make sure that all of the locations have this hospitality is through our 5-star standards, which we spent a lot of time going to places and studying, Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, high-end resorts, and of course, twisting it in a way that isn't pretentious and that feels more approachable, but making sure that our guests feel that level of service. So that's everything. And these are all written down, documented. And of course, there's training that goes with it. But that's everything from the language that we use. We never say customers, they're our guests, right? We're hosting them for an experience. It's not transactional. When someone asks where the restroom is, we don't just point down the hallway, we escort them there. Any time that someone's celebrating something special, we communicate that to the rest of the team. So even if you haven't interacted with someone before, our staff will come up to you and say, hey, Mark, happy, 20th anniversary. We're so excited for you to be here. And that makes you feel so special that everyone knows who you are, what you're celebrating, even if you haven't interacted with that guest. And then that even goes down to our professionalism standards. So how our teammates should act amongst each other. A lot of our staff comes from bars and restaurants, and the culture there is very different than what we're trying to create. So, we don't tolerate gossip. We don't tolerate speaking negatively to one another. Whether it's our housekeepers or our front of house staff, everyone is on the same level. Everyone's on the same team. So we've outlined some standards to make sure that work culture stays consistent. So whether you're working at one of our corporate-owned Oakwells or a franchise Oakwell in New York City, that work internal culture should feel the same.
So good. Listeners, I wanted to highlight Michelin Casual. If you've never heard that phrase, you heard it here first. And you also reminded me, I love the benchmarking. I do recall a speaker from Ritz-Carlton once saying about internal culture, this ladies and gentlemen working with ladies and gentlemen, that they really treat each other with respect, as you would a guest. So therefore, it's not just, hey, buddy, hey, pal, or certainly not talking down to somebody you think is below you on the org chart. So it's good stuff. Congrats.
If I can
Yes.
piggyback on that, I love hearing your systems, because that is what makes anything scalable. And I'll say it's so interesting to me across such different fields. My school is way too big now for me to directly teach, and I do have coaches at our school, and I had to figure out, how do I, bottle and be able to replicate how I teach. And so we have a system, and our coaches know when they meet someone to coach them. First you listen, and then you encourage, and then you identify the one key issue. You don't give them 20 problems with their script. You identify the one thing. And then you leave them with a very specific assignment, and you build accountability to make sure the assignment is done. And so every coach follows this format. There's more to it than that. And I developed a teacher training program. But I love hearing about systems from other business owners, because that's really what the thing runs on. It's not inspiration. That's the initial thing, but then you have to build systems to be able to replicate what you do.
So true. What a great conversation. We've explored so many signature methods here. We've talked about building brands through, this creative resilience, turning intuition into something that's repeatable. I'd love to go around the virtual room here. And as we are talking maybe to an individual listener who's listening to the show today, saying, oh, this is all very good. How could I begin to develop what I do into a branded, signature, repeatable method? I'd love to get your insight of something that, somebody could do this week. They're going to turn the podcast off and they say, I'd like to get started. Where could they begin? Jody, maybe I could start with you.
I say surrender. Don't overthink it. Because if you don't have that idea yet, the best thing to do is surrender, and it will end up coming to you. Because I was at that pivotal moment where my company looked one way with 14 employees, and I was drowning trying to maintain all of that and trying to keep that container when I moved to Florida as I'm going through a divorce. I'm talking, I burned everything everything just burned to the ground to grow back up to be the Phoenix Rising. But I just had to sit there. I remember a moment when I was sitting on my sofa just crying. I just don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And I don't know how to make this work. And so I literally booked a trip to North Carolina, and I called it my unplug retreat. And I did nothing. I went hiking. I did a vision board. I read books. I cooked farm to table food, and I just sat and I surrendered, and emails piled up. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't bring my computer. I didn't turn TV on. I had lights, and that's about it for whatever. And things just started to come in. And then I took 5.5 weeks and I traveled around to go see clients, and I just did the bare minimum, the most important things that I needed to do for my business. And I just thought and drove and thought and drove. And that's how I ended up in Denver and Chicago and all the places. I surrendered, and then the answers came. And I felt like I was in a boat, with all these holes coming in. People were drilling holes. They needed a piece of me. And I felt like I was putting all my fingers and toes in the holes, trying to keep the float above. And I was drowning in all of my thoughts. So I pulled my fingers and toes out and I let the boat sink and I back floated. And now I have a whole new direction on where I want to take the company. And it came to me. So I would say surrender and let things come to you instead of trying to do things out of fear. When we do things out of fear, I feel like the universe has to course correct us and get us back to where they want us to be, but they've got to fix all the things that we tried to do this over here because we were scared this was going to fall apart, and do this over here. So if you just stop, let the boat sink and float, I think it will. That's my best advice. It will come.
Very insightful. You say you did nothing, but look at all you did. So isn't that counterintuitive? Damien, what would you say to one of our listeners today?
Yeah, sure. Be unreasonable and clueless while respecting the best practices. That's the best way to avoid listening that tiny little voice telling you that this is not a great idea. Often you're in America, one of the best country in the world for innovation, the right to dream, and sometimes to access the capital you need to start something from scratch. So be unreasonable, be clueless, be bold, but respect the best practices so you can, as Jody, you said, you can organize your messy ideas into containers and push these out there. And then, the best way to see it alive and working is to see the interactions with your prospect, guests, clients, whoever you're serving. But this is the best way to avoid listening to that little voice inside full of cynicism telling you, no, this is not a great idea, will never work. Or don't listen to your best friends telling you it has been done again and again, don't do it. You can always reimagine the category and applying your signature sauce to it.
Such good advice. Allah, what would you say to someone listening today, how they could get started?
If you're going to take an action this week, I would say two things. Do what Jessica and Damien did. They talked about the world tour, your version of it, meaning two things. One is figure out what's fun. Like, that's number one. If you got to be having fun for anything good to come out of it. And number two, even if it's just one person, who are you going to have fun with? And, whether you're working on your own, I run my business, but so many people made that possible, including my husband. What's going to be fun and who are you going to have that fun with? And the who part is really important. This is the part that people miss and the reason we stall. Those are the two things I would say to do.
Good advice. Jessica, what would you tell a listener they could begin this week to do?
I'm a big fan of documentation because there's so many things that are going on in our head, and you may know how you get something done, what your signature method is, but until you can really distill that into words and then be able to teach others and explain to others in a well-defined manner how you go about doing that, then it's just going to feel like it's all up in your head and it's not clear. And so I love writing. It can even be free flow. You don't need to worry about coming up with SOPs, but just start writing down what exactly you think is your signature sauce, your signature method, what makes you special, what you do special. And from that, you'll be able to pick out some key points and really then be able to articulate it to others. And hopefully, if you're growing, like it sounds like, Jody's had employees before, Ella now has people running her company. You need to be able to communicate that to others like we do to our employees. It's one thing just to be able to run it all yourself, but to be able to really grow and develop, if that's your aspiration to turn it into something bigger, you need to be able to train others how you go about doing in creating your signature brand. And that really is going to be done through writing it down and through documentation.
So good. Listeners, this is worth hitting that rewind button a couple of times. You've got a lot of good nuggets just in the last 5 minutes of where you could go to start, writing down those memorable experiences that you think you can repeat. Find the who. I love that. And maybe writing things down, combine that with a vision board and a drive around the country. Who knows what could emerge? What a great panel. Allah, Tier, Jessica and Damien Zouawi, and Jody Koch. Thanks so much for your insights and your stories.
Thank you so much.
And listeners, I'm going to put all the links to connect with these guests in the show notes. Reach out to them, read more about their stories, about their work. We just had a little glimpse into their success. They've got so much to offer, so that's why I want to put their links in the show notes. If today's conversation has sparked something for you, it's the reason that we do this the podcast and my own book about 6 lessons learned from the podcast. So thanks so much for joining. If you enjoyed the episode, of course, take a moment to follow, rate, review. It really helps keep these conversations going about how we get inspired and how we organize ideas, and of course, how we gain the confidence and the connections to turn our ideas into impact. So until next time, I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll keep unlocking your world of creativity.